Hello, beautiful people on Instagram and Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Hope you're having a great evening. Sorry if I look from side to side because I've got Instagram on my phone and I've got the other platforms on my laptop. So looking a little bit from side to side. So I'm happy to be here tonight. My Sunday Silver is about belonging. I have been, as you probably know, if you followed me for any length of time, and especially if you read my any of my publications or you follow me on social media, you probably know that I like to run, and then I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm running. And what often happens is that then I learn something from these audiobooks and I share it with people. So right now I am listening to a book by Brene Brown. I have a lot of her books. I really like them. So I hadn't heard of this one before. It actually came out in 2019, which is a little weird because she's talking about things like um, loneliness and belonging and community and dehumanization of people. And when you think about what's happened in the meantime, it's a little weird to hear her talking about it. And it's like you have no idea where things are going to go now. So yeah, that is interesting, but it's still a really, really useful and helpful book, I think. It's called Braving the Wilderness. It's by Brene Brown, and I strongly recommend it. So anyway, if you're here, I would love for you to say hello, tell me where you're from, and we can chat because tonight I want to talk about belonging. And I'm going to sort of base it on the things that I've learned from Brene Brown. I have to tell you, though, I have not yet finished the book, so I can't tell you everything that she says about this, but even just the beginning of the book is definitely worth talking about. So here's the thing. So she starts off by talking about her childhood, like her family moved around a fair bit. I can really relate to that because my family did too when I was a child. My father's an academic, so we moved around a bit. Hey, Hope, nice to see you. And thanks for joining. And I'm just talking about a book that I'm listening to by Brene Brown, which is called Braving the Wilderness. And it's about things like belonging and so on. Because, so many of us join organizations, we join companies, we join things because we're looking for community. And this book really goes to the heart of what it is that we mean when we're looking for community. And thank you, Hope. I appreciate you. Greetings from Winnipeg, where sky is actually blue, believe it or not. I'm sure it is in Florida as well. So anyway, so she's talking about how in her childhood they moved around a fair bit, and so she was always the new girl and never belonging anywhere, which I could really, really relate to because my family moved around a fair amount when I was a child as well. And then I myself changed countries. I moved to the Netherlands when I was 20, and then I moved to Canada when I was 34. And I've been here ever since. I turned 60 this year. So I've lived in this house in Winnipeg the longest that I've ever lived anywhere. And my kids, well, they weren't born in this house, but they came to this house from the hospital and they lived here their whole lives. And my eldest is grown and gone, and the second one is getting ready to follow. So this is a time of transition for me and really learning, really thinking about things like belonging and community and what does it mean to belong and why do we want it so much. So that's what I wanted to talk about. So with this book by Brene Brown, I haven't finished it, but it's been an interesting read so far. And she talks about, she tells a story about how when she was 12, she wanted to join a drill squad. I guess it's cheerleaders. And she didn't make it in. And she was so shamed and miserable and so on. And her parents split up and seems like it was altogether a terrible time. But So she spent a lot of her life trying to fit in, and I can really relate to that. And would love to hear whether you can relate to that too, because we spend a lot of time and energy trying to fit in. We see what looks from the outside like a kind of community that we would want to be part of, and then we create this persona, this false persona that isn't necessarily who we really are, and we show that to the world because, for whatever reason, because we've always felt like an outsider, we don't necessarily believe that who we really are, assuming we even know who we really are, but who we think that who we really are is not worthy or is not going to be allowed into that community because, if you've been an outsider all your life, then the assumption is no community wants you. I mean, they might have. Maybe you didn't give them a chance, but that's a whole different story. But if you come with the story that nobody's going to accept you if they know who you really are, then you're going to pretend to be somebody else. And of course, that is really exhausting too. And at some point, not fulfilling. People can have huge success and rise to leadership positions and so on, and then, basically destroy themselves. I was just reading a book by Bell Hooks, oh, blessed memory. It's called All About Love. If you read it, if you like it, let me know. But she's talking about President Clinton because she was writing this in the time of the Monica Lewinsky issue. But I have to tell you, I have watched Monica Lewinsky rebuild her life, and I am impressed with that person, let me tell you. But anyway, that's a whole different story. But that was a tangent. But anyway, she talks about Bill Clinton and about how he was so successful, and he was at the time, like he was at the time of his popularity, was at its peak, and he was doing so well, and the economy was doing great, and everything was doing great, and so he had to do something stupid to bring himself down, because clearly not my job to analyze Bill Clinton, but just quoting Bell Hooks, clearly he felt that he needed to bring himself down, that he didn't deserve to be so successful and joyful. So he had to do something to mess it up. And that is something that I think a lot of people can really relate to, whether you're a fan of Bill Clinton or not. A lot of people can relate to the idea of, that when things are too good, you want to mess them up. There's another book recommendation there, which is The Big Leap by Nia Hendrix. And he talks exactly about that, about how what he calls the upper limit problem. And he also mentions Bill Clinton, now that I think about it. He must have written it around the same time that Bell Hooks was writing her book. And it's the same story. It's the idea that people destroy their own success because they can't stand their internal story is that they don't deserve to have so much success and love and money and all the good things. So they bring it down. So how does this all go with belonging? So that's the thing, is that we set up persona to fit, and it can be really exhausting. And in the end, you might feel that you still don't fit, because the other thing is that if you come into a community with this false persona and with expectations that whatever void you have in your heart is going to be filled by the people in this community, or maybe you're following a leader that you think that you've put up on a pedestal. Leaders are humans just like everybody else. They might have just had more experience or more aptitude for something, but they are just humans like everybody else. We tend to forget that. But then we set up unreasonable expectations, and then we get disappointed, and then we're gone again. I know a lot of people who bounce from company to company, from community to community, because they can never fill that void in their heart, because they're not being in integrity anywhere. And so she talks about that, and it's really interesting because, and now I'm talking about Brene, she's talks about having been a fan of Dr. Maya Angelou her whole life. And I just want to read you a quote, because she loved everything that Maya Angelou had written, except for this one quote from an interview from 1973 with Bill Moyer. Dr. Angelou said, "You are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great." And Brene's response to that was that she just could not accept that was just wrong, that it was so important to belong somewhere. And she worked so hard to fit in. And she did all the things that she thought were expected of her. And she was not, it wasn't the thing. It wasn't right. And I haven't finished her book, so I will be coming back to talk some more about that. But I just wanted to leave you tonight with thought about belonging and about being in integrity and in being free. Okay, because this quote from Maya Angelou is something else. Okay, that basically you can't be free unless you accept that you belong nowhere and everywhere. We are social animals, and it can be, it can strike fear into people's hearts to be kicked out of the tribe or to not belong in the tribe because there might be saber-toothed tigers out there. So nowadays there are not saber-tooth tigers out there, and we can find ourselves a new place where we do fit, or which is the right place for us, or maybe we just need to belong to ourselves. Brene tells the story of how she was being interviewed by Oprah, and Oprah invited her to meet with Maya Angelou, who was there, and they talked about belonging to yourself. If you can belong to yourself, then it doesn't matter whether you belong to a community or not. You can choose to belong to a community. You belong every place and no place. There's no place that owns you. You own yourself. And Brene talks about all sorts of things. This whole braving thing is an acronym for, and the B stands for boundaries. I remember that really struck me. And then there's other parts. The I is for integrity. There's all sorts of bits there having to do with, how people can live a good life. But I will be talking more about this because, like I said, I haven't finished the book yet. But I'll probably talk about this some more next week. But the parts that I've got to so far, what really strikes me is that she's talking about dehumanization and about how the genocides and torture and terrible things that people do to each other, we have really strong inhibitions of hurting someone that we recognize as a fellow human. So she talks about how to be able to do terrible things, we have to first dehumanize the other person, like the Nazis calling Jews rats, or the Hutus calling the Tutsis cockroaches, or even in North America, people calling each other pigs or whatever. And as soon as you dehumanize the other side, then you have given yourself permission to be really horrible. And, and families get split down the middle. I have friends that, I work really hard actually to not dehumanize people, but we do have barriers between us now. Friends that I maybe only talk to about specific things and not about others, and I can't really allow them into my heart because of things that have happened, or things that they've said that I don't agree with. And it's really important to re-examine these things and to make sure that that these choices are made very carefully and not reflexively. Like one thing that Brene mentions, and this is a book that I haven't read, but it's called Divergent, and it's apparently a dystopian speculative fiction in which people are supposed to choose factions, and the faction is supposed to be more important than your family, and that is what's happening now all over the world. And so, yeah, I will come back next week when I have finished the book. But in the meantime, if you want to leave me any comments, if you want to tell me what you think about these things, I would love to know. And thanks for joining me here online. And I'll be putting this on YouTube as well. So you have a great evening. Remember, I love you. Talk to you again next week. Bye-bye. Turn off Instagram. and broadcast.